Now we're live-ish. Now we're fake live. Hello and welcome to another episode of Tech Deck Karaoke. This week we are joined by Jeff Eiben from Riverpoint Technology. Jeff, welcome, and please introduce yourself and your company to the audience here.
Yeah, thank you to Joe and Sabrina. Nice to be on with you. Watched a few of your episodes before. It's a great podcast, and appreciate it. So Jeff Eiben, Riverpoint Technology. I'm the founder of the company. We started in 2011, focused on emerging technology. So today we work with Fortune 500 companies, mostly around their automation initiatives, supporting cloud, their migrations to cloud. So it's a fun space, always changing. Technology's hard, so there's always pain for companies like us to support companies in their efforts.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Jeff. And as usual, as penance for my prior sins, Sabrina is here. Sabrina, welcome.
That's right. I've been sent from the Lord, Joe. I've been sent from the Lord, or sunny New York. So my first Tech Deck Karaoke remote. So here we go. Yes, I can affirm Joe has not seen the slides, and he's still as terrible as ever. So let's go.
Yeah.
Let's get after it.
I think I gave him a little more warning than 30 minutes, so he may have got a preview on us.
I did not. It has been a busy day. I picked up that email about 3 seconds ago, so I as usual, have not seen the slides. This is going to be, as it tends to be, this is going to be me learning with you, the audience, and then Jeff will get to correct all of my mistakes and tell you what Riverpoint really does.
I can affirm that the morning that he just had, he definitely did not see your deck. He's been busy. Yeah.
Between a very busy work schedule as the company grows and the fact that last night at about 9 p.m. I picked up a brand new puppy, I have both had no sleep and had no time.
Yeah, what kind of puppy is it?
So he is an Australian Shepherd.
Right, beautiful. Yeah, puppies are fun.
Yeah, they are. I had forgotten. I think people do the same with kids, but I had forgotten all the pain of the early puppy, and I can only remember the joy.
Yeah, it's rough. But
yeah,
good.
Luckily,
you want to get to the other side, but they're awesome to have.
Exactly. Luckily, he's in pouting mode right now because he's not allowed to chew on everything in the house. All right. Without further ado, I am going to pull up these slides, and I am going to act like an expert as we present to you value creation technology.
Well, we talked about the hazing part earlier, Jeff. I feel like you're not really living up to that right now. We'll give it a minute. We'll
Let's start early, then we'll tag team on him, Sabrina.
Excellent. Thank you.
Excellent. So Riverpoint Technology and value creation technology. I love the value creation technology that we're starting with on the title slide. And this may seem, marketeering to some people, but when you look at technology, I've been around this world for more decades than I'd like to admit. And in the beginning, we were creating value for businesses. We were transforming the first written memo systems into email systems, speeding communication within a corporation. We were digitizing voice for the first times, things like that. We were truly creating value. And then over my career, we slipped into this hole where our job was really ROI. How can we do the same thing as yesterday, cheaper? And now we're moving back into this point where technology has the ability to enable new business initiatives, new revenue streams, the mission to be achieved faster. And so we really need to start looking at technology as a value creation point again. And I love that title. I hope I can carry that theme through here and hit this where Jeff wants this slide deck to go, but we will see.
I see gray in your beard, but I don't really think you were around when those technologies were around. That seems like a long, you don't seem that old.
Well, fun fact, I was not a fan of formal education. So my career started full-time in IT when I was 16 and had dropped out of high school.
Yeah, nice.
So it was Lotus, Domino, Novell Networks, and then a transition to Windows NT.
Yeah, we've had a few folks.
Stay in school, kids. Stay in school. School is cool.
Yeah.
School is cool.
I will not comment.
A recommended route. Work for Joe.
Yeah. I never recommend my path. It's not a repeatable process for sure. All right. So when we look at how we're going to do this, first, we've all got numbers, and it's nice to know the numbers and kind of have an idea of what's happening in the industry. So in this number, 84% of digital transformation initiatives fail. Now, that's interesting because we usually don't talk about the failure rate of our technology initiatives, especially the big buzzwordy ones that everyone wants to be selling you. When you think about why digital transformation initiatives fail, you should start to get a picture of what's happening and what would cause that. First, the word transformation gives away a lot of this. We're not doing some new networking to replace our old networking. We're not doing some new storage or server to replace our old storage or server. We're truly transforming business processes, line of business, go to market, whatever it may be. So these are more complex, both from the tech and the business component. Secondly, they involve both the hardware or infrastructure that the software runs on and the software applied to the business. So what Jeff and team are talking about here is marrying technology to process to the resources and the culture, kind of a 4-step process. And we know these things, but we fail at combining them and aligning them quite often. It's very easy to deploy the right technology and fail everywhere else because you didn't integrate it into your process. You're trying to use this new DevOpsy platform with an old ITIL change management process, or you didn't have the right resources, the right cultural change, or the right people and operational changes through things like training enablement and the ability to provide true adoption for the technology. So we have to look at this holistically to have any level or any chance of success.
I can't make fun of you. You're going to say everything right. So
yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can just correct me wherever you choose, actually. So when you look at the approach that they're taking there with Jeff's team at Riverpoint, it's a philosophy based on years of experience, which is really important when you're looking at transformation, right? Experience is not always as important in some aspects of technology if it's truly cutting edge and nobody really knows about it. Like there's no 20-year experts in quantum computing floating around. But when we're looking at the ability to adopt a new technology process and drive something forward, there's a lot of experience here. And that experience with it brings the scars that protect you from known problems and allow you to adopt better. So the first thing that they look at is a choose phase. And in this choose phase, we're going to have a go, no-go check. The ability to ensure that before we move forward from point A to point B or point B to point C, so on, that we know what are the failure factors, what are the gating requirements before we start flipping a switch, turning on a technology or changing a process. And that's an extremely important piece of the process. It does a lot of things for us. One, it makes sure that we're not jumping into that technology before those things we knew were gating factors are correctly provisioned, configured, adopted. But two, it helps us eliminate a behavioral psychology concept that we think of as the sunk cost fallacy. If we go in and we don't have gates, we don't have go and no-go checks, what ends up happening is we just keep rolling because we've already thrown money and time into this, keep rolling, and we never want to pull back out. But before we start emotionally investing and monetarily investing and time investing in a technology, if we know those gating factors, it's easier to use them to pull back, stop, or pause when required because we decided on them before we actually created that emotional attachment. Then we move into two, that incubate phase. So we've had all our go checks. There are no no-goes, so we can move forward. Now we need to incubate this. And in that incubation phase, what we want to do is win or fail fast. And I love fail fast. Anyone that's heard me talk or present at executive briefings to the rest, it's something I typically talk quite a lot about. Failing fast is a great marketing term, but when you look at it, it's not just failing fast. It's not failure for the sake of failure. It's not the Mark Zuckerberg move fast and break things. It's having the courage to make mistakes, but also having the courage to acknowledge them quickly, back out of them, and then move forward with a better plan, right? So it's a twofold thing. Otherwise, we get very stagnant. So in that incubation phase, we want to prove a quantifiable business outcome. We want to know what success looks like. And this is easier, again, to define upfront in the process, along with your trusted advisor. You want to create momentum using that quantifiable business outcome. And I think this is a huge part of any technology adoption process, because you want small wins all the way along the way. Sure, yeah, we're going to digitally transform all the leprechauns on the back end, and that's going to generate millions of rainbow dollars. But how are we going to get through all the slog to get there? We're going to do that with small wins that are quantifiable to keep that momentum, to keep that motivation. And then finally, we want to evaluate how that technology aligns to the current process and any technical debt we have. We have to carry forward some level of our technical debt, and we can't change all of our processes at once. So we want to figure out how we can massage the new into the old while carrying the old forward. And then finally, we get to the phase where we scale. We have gone past our go, no go checks. We have incubated, we have dropped things that didn't work, adapted to things that do, and now we take it out and we scale. And so this continuous improvement process is interestingly an improvement process for the way in which you adopt technology that aligns right to software development technology or methodologies like DevOps.
Is schlag a technical term, or is it not that? Add that
Schlag is a technical term. It is a term that means at least 60 hours a week for 4 or more weeks in the language I just made up.
Perfect.
According to Gartner, yeah.
We can add that to Webster.
So to avoid the schlag, by calling Jeff and his team, we're going to go through this. You're going to go through this approach, and they're going to work with your team to align this approach to how you work and what the outcomes are you're trying to drive. Again, the choose phase focuses on that go, no check, enables that foundational technology. It's going to have the potential to deliver a measurable business impact. And potential is an important word here because you have to have the ability to measure it. You have to know the business impact you want to make. And most times we do, but not every time. So some things have to be adapted. And then finally, it's got to be something that's compatible with your people, process, and culture. And that's an interesting thing to call out because a lot of times we think we can simply adopt any technology, any process, any people into our team. But if they create a clash on any one of these aspects, we're not going to have the same success. So ensuring that we're aligning those 3 things to what we're looking to transform is a critical part of that first choosing phase. Then moving into phase 2, where we're going to incubate. So proving out quantifiable business outcomes we can measure, creating that momentum to keep pace through that technical term schlag, and then evaluating how that technology aligns with those current processes to make sure that you're bringing those processes along with the technology. There's no sense in having that agile Kubernetes cloud deployment if you have to wait 2 weeks for every aspect of change management along the way, because your technology is moving fast, anchored back to your people and process. And then finally, our scale phase. And here's where we're integrating the new solutions into the technology. We're expanding the scope of what we're looking at from this transformation. We're beginning to focus on our people by doing things like upskilling and addressing concerns of the existing team. This is going to be made easier, by the quantifiable wins we built in the last phase. It's easier to convert a skeptic when you have the proof of success, and then realigning those processes to enable that solution to actually improve them, right? Because the process and the technology, along with the people, are going to create that outcome.
Were you ever a skeptic, Joe, when you were in Czech?
Was I ever what?
A skeptic.
I'm always a skeptic. Yes, 100%.
That's the persona.
Yeah, that's the persona. Yeah. So my first sales engineering job, I was the hitman on the team. When new vendors used to come in and try and get us to sell their technology, they'd get to talk to the team and the whole team would give feedback and my boss would save me for last. And then I'd just shoot holes.
Nice.
And I don't know why I like being that particular type of jerk, but I do.
Somebody needs to do it.
Exactly. That's my.
I have some ideas. I've been making a list actually. So if you want to talk about it, I'm ready.
I'm just an angry, unhappy soul, and that's the way it presents.
So why you live on a ranch in Wyoming? Or is that?
Yeah, I mean it's curmudgeonville, right? This is perfect. So what can you do? You can promote and incorporate the processes into your workflow. You can understand and be realistic about what stage your organization is in, but also what your organization looks like from a technology adoption phase to begin with, right? We've all seen in some point the technology adoption curve where we have the leaders and we have the laggards and we have a few things in between. If you're a laggard thinking you're a leader, you're not going to have successful adoption technology processes, right? So be realistic with how your team wants to adopt and your appetite for risk with new technologies. I'm not a person who typically deploys bleeding edge technologies in production. I'll let other people go take the arrows of those bleeding edge technologies. But there is risk associated with that too. There are chances we could miss. So understand where you are, be realistic with it, engage across the company more holistically rather than only at the technical level. And I think this is probably, to me, the most critical point in a digital transformation, because a lot of our previous technology sales, evolutions, revolutions have been IT focused and could maintain a technical conversation. When we're talking about digital transformation, we're talking about literally transforming the business. So if we're not expanding our scope from the technical into at least the business, and then hopefully the people in the process, we're not going to have the level of success we're looking for. And then finally, push for that executive alignment. If this is led from middle management or director level leadership, it's going to have a harder time getting through. Find that executive level champion, align with that, and ensure that all of the stakeholders are leading towards that same goal and helping to maintain that momentum that you're building. And that is value creation technology. Or it's not, and Jeff will correct me.
It's up to everybody's interpretation. That's the beautiful part about it. So Sabrina, what was your list? We want to hear.
Why Joe is the way he is. Okay. Now it's I don't even know if we have time today to go through all of those things. I'd have to really dig deep for that. I don't know.
I mean, I've been working closely with my therapist for maybe 6 years, and she still doesn't have a kid.
There's
a lot of
getting somewhere with
analysis there. Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
All right. So what did you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think you did really well. I mean, it's just, and that's kind of the whole point of the concept is technologists like to overcomplicate things. So this is literally a process we've defined to simplify things, however, incorporate all of what we call the 4 legs of the stool into our workflow. Technologists tend to get isolated, very siloed on the technology. However, and so it's not necessarily just the roadmap for companies. It's also for an individual to help elevate their own career in terms of how do I become a more valuable employee to my employer by not just being really good at the technology I know, but really understanding the business problems. How do we quantify that? How does my organization adopt technology? How do I help support the team? There are all those things, and that's I think you did well. That's the intention of it, is to make it nice and simple.
I like it, and it definitely helps that the deck has a good flow. It's telling a story about what's going on, and it stays at that focus of like, what are the big picture, big ticket items we need to focus on. I enjoyed that quite a bit, and I think your comment on technologists is really interesting because I've come from a background where I've worn principal engineer and CTO titles, and I've sat in architectural conversations where we'll rat hole on protocol A versus protocol B for days when
That's
both
right.
protocols could solve the problem.
Yeah.
And we never even think about who wants to adopt, who likes what, who's going to be willing to champion what, which are huge pieces of that, right? The technology is often the easier challenge.
Yeah. I just sat on a call with one of our partners and their founder, and we were with a very large financial services company, and it was a really good geek fest with all the technologies. And, they're like, well, how do we adopt this? And I'm like, well, our first recommendation is you take a step backwards and understand what you're really trying to solve here and quantify that, because that'll really drive the technology decision. Like any one of these paths you could go, right? But you're really going to have the output you desire and the timeline you desire. So it's a pretty common thing that we see. So it's not unique to you.
Yeah, no. I think it's interesting. Years ago, I walked out of an interview process with a networking startup because I was talking to the person who would have been my boss, and she asked me, if you're building a spine leaf data center network, what's the routing protocol you'd choose? And I said I'd want to understand what the customer's religion was on a routing protocol, because I could use basically anything from RIP version 2 on to BGP, depending on what they cared about. And she's like, no, I want to know which one you want. And I'm like, yeah, that's not an answer I'm going to give you, nor does it matter in an actual sales cycle. If I can solve the problem with multiple tools, I'm going to find the tool the customer wants that fits into their process, that fits into their cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
All right, Jeff. Well, are you ready to show our audience what this deck is really supposed to say?
Let me give it a whirl, I guess. The process we define around value creation technology is to ultimately help guide beyond just the technology conversation. And that's often, as technologists, what we like, right? Everybody likes the shiny new object, and really and we see often what happens in our customers, or some executive reads something in a trade publication and throws it down the hill to, hey, we want to implement, or we're going to move to the cloud, or we're going to do analytics or AI, whatever the new buzzword is of the day, right? And then there's really no direction in terms of like what that means or how you're going to accomplish it. So, the statistic Forbes puts out around 84%. It's typically like 70 to 90%, depending on where you get your numbers from, one of the big five, or and part of it is what you hit on, Joe, is like, I don't really think folks really understand how to measure what success looks like. And so ultimately, that's what we try to educate them around and guide them through. So, the four legs of the stool you hit on are really important, but often they're not all considered. It's very simple. It's like a no-brainer thing, but most folks just kind of skip the one or the other, or don't really think about all of them. So good advance, Sabrina. The next one. So the approach itself is broken into the three phases. And again, this was really just through a lot of years of working with customers, from early adopters to laggards. And it's not necessarily just predicated on success, but it's also like what's failed. Like there's been a lot of failures that we've been associated with as well. And it's kind of those, what do you watch out for things? And so the choose phase, I think from my perspective, and the way we approach it, is a little more cart before horse of what you said, but it's ultimately like, why are we even doing this? Like, what I see are a lot of companies will like, we're going to evaluate this technology. We're going to do a proof of concept and see if this technology works. So I'm like, it's largely a science project. It wastes a lot of time. So it's, if you believe any of the statistics, that 80 to 90% of the technologist's time are spent like keeping the lights on, active, internal projects. You have about 10 to 20% of your time to actually innovate with. And so we really want to spend that time wisely. So the choose phase is really like, is this even worth it? Like I say, is it a foundational change? Meaning, is it a foundational technology, or is it what I call table stakes technology? Table stakes technology is like every one of your competitors is going to be doing the same thing, and may pick up some operational efficiency, but doesn't really move the needle for the company, right? Foundational is that which has an ecosystem that I'm going to ultimately build and scale other use cases and value for the company around. And so to me, that's like fundamentally like answering that question before I even waste my time calling vendors or looking at Gartner reports and doing all these different things. And the reality is, like, do we even have the capacity to adopt this technology? And a lot of times you can just look, like, where does your IT organization report into? Is it into the CFO function, which is an expense line, or is it into the COO, where it's truly perceived as a valuable asset to the organization? So that ultimately, it's just like, don't waste your time, or at least know what you're going in to play the game for. If you're really just going in to just upgrade some operational efficiency, nothing wrong with that, but really understand your outputs to the business probably aren't tangible. The incubate phase is where I really see a lot of customers get stuck, and it's, they typically, again, want to look at, like, let's play around with the technology. And again, I mentioned earlier, it's a science project, but the reality is, like, this is where you can get your wins and fail fast, as you mentioned earlier, or win. Like, it's about getting small wins, creating momentum to ultimately, that's what gets some of that cultural alignment, as you mentioned, as well as other folks on board to gain some of that executive level support. Like, everyone wants to be a part of a winning team, right? Like, folks that are like, okay, I want that for my department. I was at VMware in the early days, and we always had this battle of like, well, that virtualization technology sounds really cool. I just don't want it for my application. And then ultimately, once they saw how portable it was, how quickly I recover from it, everybody's like, sign me up, right? I want to be on that train. We overcame that objection. And it really was, we were past all the cultural objections at that point. So it's getting those wins, getting that belief, and it's also getting alignment across the other groups to understand the business problems, understand how we're ultimately, bringing value. And then the scale part is kind of what we do for a living. We call it the day two, but it's ultimately like the days of like set it and forget it type technology, I call it, are kind of over. It's like it's an ongoing event, meaning like you're always going to be maturing your different level, as you mature with the technology, new challenges or new opportunities come about with it. How do I continue to evolve it so it just doesn't become siloed into one group or ultimately shelfware as well. So we can skip to the next, Sabrina. So I kind of hit on a lot of this already. It's just really about being smart with your time available for innovation and ultimately like bringing that value to your organization, into your own personal career, and just being smart with how you invest in that. I see sometimes folks really get caught up in what I call like feature technology. Like they're kind of cool, but they don't really they'll ultimately, get embedded into some larger platform, and it's just really kind of, it's not like a game changer for the organization. And again, it's, there's nothing wrong with that. I will say, it's just, if you're really trying to create value for the organization with technology, you kind of want to focus your energy and around where you're going to have a real win with it. And then you can flip to the next video, Sabrina. So we talked about this a little bit, but ultimately, where I've seen some folks have success is, being able to kind of take the lead. Like it doesn't necessarily have to start as an executive push down, but if you really want to elevate your own career, it's ultimately like understanding how am I impacting the business? Because as we discussed earlier, that could drive the technology and the architecture decisions and everything around it. But really I think we're all in agreement that, rogue IT and cloud services and everything else has started because the business just doesn't trust IT to be responsive in the timelines they want and really hear what their problems are. So if you don't understand the business side of it, so in the book I put together with it, we talk a little bit about like enhancing your business skills, right? Like it's great that you're strong with technology, but invariably you need to like translate that into the value. So and nobody likes to talk about processes. Like that's just not fun for anybody. If you talk to an organization, 10 people ask their process, you'll get 15 different answers, right? Like that's just the reality of it. So how are you really going to have an impact to that? And that's what we put it. It's a process, not an event. And this is kind of like everyone always asks, like, hey, what's the winning strategy? Well, the winning strategy is purely just constant, ongoing enablement and alignment. And so some of the things we do with our customers are just ongoing, like everybody having a seat at the table, quarterly reviews. Okay, what did we accomplish last quarter? What did we accomplish next quarter? So that it's not like we're setting up technology and throwing it over the wall. We break our customers down into like two camps. We call them the producer and the consumer. So the producer is like the person that owns the technology, the bells and the whistles. But the consumer is really where success or failure happens. Are people going to actually leverage this technology in the organization to execute across the use cases and bringing that business value that we intended it to be for? And so you really kind of need to look at both of them. And the consumer can really sink in a technology initiative pretty quickly if they're just pretty happy with doing things the way they've always done them. So it's a pretty important part. And this is where I see most folks today, most of our customers. The typical call we get is, hey, we've been doing this for 2 years. We're really not that far along. And like, we have 3 years left in our initiative. Can you help? I call it like, it's our clean up and off 5 sales process. Like, it's like, hey, we're kind of failing here. Can you help? And it's like, it's a pretty easy decision because they're pretty easy work for us because that's what kind of we do is help the customers through that period. And the reality is it's not just about learning new technology. It's a new operating model. It's a new framework to work within. It's challenging IT and as well as the consumer within the business, the development teams, the lines of business, etc. We can go to the last one, Sabrina. So ultimately, I did pen a book around it to kind of bring that to the folks. It's available on Amazon, but it's really intended, again, not necessarily just like this is the process we work through with our customers, but it's really just like sharing it with the community. Again, there's nothing with I would call rocket science in here. It's just simplifying it, and it seems so simple that it's like, well, no kidding, Mr. Obvious. But the reality is, as you hit on it, Joe, it's like most folks kind of cut the corner on something here, and that's where they get into trouble. And if it's just purely a technology game with like playing with shiny objects, it's probably not going to have a lot of success. And we find, as you know, technologists are very risk averse. There's a lot of failed initiatives that people don't want to put their name to. So we really just try to help align and inform the technologists within the organization to how do you have success. And covering all these bases is what we've seen work with customers of all sizes. And the biggest of the big and some smaller ones as well. So, and that's the message.
I love it. And Sabrina and I are actually witnessing in this. We've been working on a few projects with some large telecoms. And basically in the telecom industry, for those that aren't familiar, there's a couple of major things going on. One is the transition to 5G. And the second is a desire to disaggregate the RAN or radio area network stack and the core. It used to be you buy your hardware and software stack with all the functions from a single vendor and its appliance model. Yeah. Now they want more options, x86, x64 type common standardized hardware underneath, that type of stuff. And so long story short, what we're seeing is they're deploying this Kubernetes stack with taking their virtual network functions to containerize network functions, and the technology gets there. But then Kubernetes is releasing a new release every 15 seconds, and they've got a 12 to 18 month test and validation cycle. So their people and process is literally adding 12 months of time to the agility of the platform they're trying to use, right? And so you see this even in people like that, who are even in customers like that, who are they know their network, they know the technology, they are great at it, but that people and process gets forgotten.
Yeah, we see, I think it's the shift from what I mentioned earlier, set it and forget it tech to where it's always ongoing and changing. We'll go into customers and they're like 5 versions behind just because they're afraid to upgrade it because of all the integrations, all the services they're going to break. And they're just like, and in VMware days, we used to call them closet monsters, right? Like, okay, we're going to virtualize everything but that one. Don't touch it. It just runs and just let it go. We see a lot of that, but that's the mentality around it. And so that it gets very... It's just ongoing, and that's different for folks to get their arms around. Like we work with automation technologies and infrastructure as code and things like that, and like an IT administrator never really operated in code, right? I don't even want to touch it. It's like testing. Why do I need to test? I just spin up a virtual machine and I'm on my way, right? It's a totally different thought process and workflow and. There's a value at the end, but getting folks to believe that and understand that and do that on an ongoing basis is the challenge, right? That's the reality of it.
Yeah. And there are so many great stories from where that process falls apart. But one of my favorites was in the early days of virtualization, when people were first starting to deploy it as an enterprise production system. I went and did a physical to virtual migration for a customer, and we migrated most every one of their servers over to virtual infrastructure, got everything up and running, tested, successful. And about 2 weeks later, I came in to kind of check up on them and check on the environment. And they gave me a tour of the data center, and they were thrilled. Yeah. And as we're touring the data center, the physical rack servers in the racks had all these labels on them. And I looked at the labels, and the labels were the virtual machine names for the virtual machines running on that physical server. But those physical servers were in a cluster where you could vMotion those machines wherever you want. We need to fix your process.
Stickers all day.
Yeah. Your process is going to need a little refresh. We'll dust it off. Everything's going to be all right.
Yeah. That's crazy. We the process part is really difficult. We work with one of our longtime customers, financial services company, and we mapped just to create a virtual machine and it was 18 different steps with about 6 manual checkpoints across different groups. And they wanted to have push button self-service infrastructure provisioning for the development team. A long way to go, right? It's the reality of like what we're up against here. That's just the way it was, and there's reasons for it. I don't disparage it, but to ultimately get to that end stage of where you want to be now, like all those things really need to be taken into account. It's not just about automating tech here. That's just one part of it. And that's easier said than done, I get, but it can be accomplished.
You also hit on a really interesting point that I'd like to highlight, but you talked about like cool features, and while we might want to deploy cool feature X from vendor X, we really need to think through like what's the real value there, why am I doing this, and the rest. And that just reminds me of like, again, back in the early days of VMware, if you walk the VMware conference, which was VMworld at the time, and if you walk the expo floor and you paid attention, you could, half of the booths with these vendors that you'd never heard of, you could look at and know you're going to be a feature of the core platform.
Man, that's where it came from. Yeah, like Platespin, all these companies. It's like now, you're a peripheral vendor. Now you're just part of the stack, and that's. I think I referenced that in the book. Like Microsoft's strategy is like they're all about embracing a technology, extending it, and then extinguishing it, right? Because it's like that kills the competitiveness around their stack. But they bring it in, and it's just like becomes. We spoke about that earlier with their Microsoft challenges, but that's the model of the big vendors, right? And the reality of it. So you could be spending cycles for obsolete technology and with very little business value.
Absolutely. And for every, like a good example, for every Veeam that grows out of an ecosystem like VMware, there's 40 dead companies that no one remembers.
Yeah. A lot of that. Yeah, for sure.
All right, Sabrina. So I know we're working with hotel bandwidth here, but what did you think?
Yeah. No, I don't know if you can see me or hear me. If not, just dub in like a bunch of boos or something. Like, oh, bad joke.
Very blurry, but
unfortunately, we can hear you though.
Oh, sorry, Joe. Sorry that didn't go away. But I will say this is so fascinating. So you don't even need to hear or see me because I'm just entrenched in this conversation. I will say, Jeff, what I liked about your presentation is that you're so honest. That, we know these are difficult processes and changes, and you factor in considerations that a lot of people leave out. But a lot of times in our effort to sell, by our, sort of our ecosystem, we leave out some of these complexities or dynamics, maybe we'll call them. And then we're inevitably going to run into them anyway. So I'm glad that you're honest at the forefront. That speaks a lot to what you're building and who you are and what your company stands for. But that was, I think, what stood out the most to me is we all know these things are going to happen. Yeah. So I'm glad you call it out on the forefront. Joe, you did okay, I guess. I don't know. But I will say you did okay.
His years of experience panned out there. So
I guess. Few gray hairs. But yes, definitely leave in the comments below how old Joe looks. You're welcome to comment about his gray hair or anything like that. That is welcomed. But no, hands down, Jeff, I got to give this to you. Nice job. Really nice job.
Thank you, Sabrina. I appreciate it. Hopefully it wasn't you were in and out with the internet from the hotel, but I'll take it.
I know. I won't name who the hotel is, but maybe if we could work with hotels at getting better internet, that'd be fun.
Right? Yeah. It is 2023, right?
It does not directly relate to profit. It will not happen.
Sure.
So Sabrina, I got to say it's a little unfair to have people comment on my age because in the 5 years I've known you, I think I've aged 3 more decades.
That's very fair. And yet I keep looking younger. That's so wild.
It's a reciprocal thing going on here. Like one way, one going the other.
It's like she's
that's
draining my life.
I'm giving you a hard time.
She's literally draining my life force. Excellent. All right. Well, fantastic, Jeff. Yeah, I really overall just enjoyed that conversation. I think it's funny because even we do a lot of sales and sales enablement training. And one of the things I tell, especially executive sellers or senior sellers before I get in the room is like, for 70% of the time I'm in front of you, you're going to hear me say things you know. And there's a reason I'm saying things because we're not applying this knowledge. So what we're going to do differently is help you understand how to architect that and apply it in a framework that's repeatable.
Yeah, I'm not as smart as some of the folks on my team, so my defense mechanism is to simplify it, and that's how I get through. So I like to bring that forward to technologists who love to overcomplicate, right? Like that's the reality. There's really not, like I said, there's nothing earth-shattering. Just simplifying and being prescriptive with all the elements of that process, rather than skipping them, thinking you have the answer.
We share that. People in my heyday would comment on how simple I can make complex technologies, and I'm like, stupid is my superpower. I have to beat my face into the desk so long to understand it that by the time I understand it, I can repeat it simply.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one.
Excellent. Well, absolutely appreciate you coming on. If people want to get in touch with you, if they want to find the book, or if they want to engage your company, give us some contact information where they can do that, social media or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Riverpoint Technology, just riverpointtechnology.com. And then my book's available on Amazon. Just search Jeff Eiben or Value Creation Technology, and that will also link back to our site. But I appreciate you having me on. It's great to speak on the one of the best tech podcasts out there. I'll give you, mostly because of Sabrina, not you, Joe, but I'll take whatever works for you guys. It's balanced.
Yeah.
It's fair, and I take no offense. My ego has its own self-defense mechanism, so all I heard is, Joe, you're great, and your podcast is fantastic.
We did every other word out.
Killing it, Joe. You're killing it. Well, thank you, Jeff. Such a pleasure as always.
You too. Enjoy New York, and Joe, enjoy your. Hopefully, winter doesn't hit you too soon here. So
we shall see. It's supposed to be an ugly one again, so it'll be interesting.
Awesome. Thank you.
Next time.